Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Island Spooks thread. It's a pleasure to share this bizarre childhood story with you. I grew up on Oahu, which surprisingly has a lot of great nature spots that are far away from the urban centers. One day, just hanging out and walking around with my brothers, we passed by a construction site. One of my brothers spots something sticking out of the dirt. He uses his hands to dig it out. It's an old Tiki Idol. We showed it to an older Hawaiian gentleman who was working nearby. He tells us we shouldn't have touched it in the first place because it's cursed. Haha, yeah, right. Weird things immediately starts happening. One of my brothers was involved in an accident during a surfing contest. A big wall decoration falls and nearly crushes my other brother's head one night. I wake up in the middle of the night with a tarantula crawling on me. All of us were pretty freaked out at this point. We returned to the construction site to look for the old gentleman. He tells us about a Hawaiian king's burial ground, located within a remote cave. We hike our way there, find the cave, and discover an old white guy living inside. Turns out he used to be a professor of archaeology that turned his back on the academic world. After some time there, we decided to leave the idol with him. All the bizarre events stopped after this. This is why I believe in ancient superstitions. I don't think they just pop up out of thin air. They get told and passed down through the generations for a reason. Hawaii is an epicenter of spiritual energy, which is no surprise as it lies at the dead center of the Pacific Ocean. I lived there for a year and a half right out of high school, and a few things I think people should know about Hawaii before traveling there is that, for one, you should never take rocks home to the mainland. I suppose this is because the islands only have a finite amount of rocks, soil, and sand on them. If every tourist took a rock as a souvenir home, I doubt it would do much on a grand scale. But the idea of there being a finite amount of said rocks on each island causes the locals to discourage anyone from taking them home or off the islands. However, that is not the only reason why you should not take any of the rocks home. Many people have reported having bad luck after getting home from their vacations in Hawaii. The only way they were able to stop this bad luck or curse was by returning the Hawaiian lava rock back to its home. This problem is so widespread that people will mail the stones to the Hawaiian government in hope of their curses being lifted. Most of the time, this works. Taking coral or seashells, I observed, has no negative effect, however. I have an abundance of strange stories of my time there that I am willing to share if asked.
Please share. I feel the Pacific and Caribbean calling me.
As I said, I lived there for a year and a half, right after I graduated high school. I moved to the Big Island in 2017 for about 5 months, and then lived on Kauai for a year. I will try to tell all of these strange events in chronological order, but there is a lot, so there may be some details or other events that I forget to mention. For the first story, I found a farm on a work trade website called WWOOF. No, it has nothing to do with furries. It stands for Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. That was my way of getting to the islands and having a place to stay. When I arrived at the property, I quickly realized it was not a farm, and the owner I had spoken to online more so had us do landscaping for free. Given it was only 15 hours a week, so most of the time we could go to the beach or into town. Something else I picked up on was that I was the only male WWOOFer. All the others, and there were several of them, were all women. I believe the owner did this on purpose and had invited me, a non-threatening 18-year-old, so that the other girls wouldn't be weirded out by him, only inviting women to come work on his property, their ages ranging from 21 to 24. The owner never made a move on any of them, I can assure you. But that sort of thing happens with WWOOVing and/or with Hawaiian landowners hiring exclusively female farmhands. 3 of the 7 women, in fact, had come from a different farm. where the owner had tried to make a move on one of them, and they abruptly left. I could share some stories about us all working on the farm, but what I would like to skip to was when we all decided to go to Volcanoes National Park. Something everyone should know about the Hawaiian Islands, but especially the Big Island, is that the climate isn't always tropical. The Big Island, in particular, is the most diverse in its climates. The northern part of the island is cool and foggy, with massive pine trees along its coast, much like Washington State. The south side of the island is a black sand desert. The west side of the island is tropical and rainy, but up the mountain there's snow. Someone told me that there are 13 unique biomes on planet Earth, and the Big Island has all 13 on it. Now, a bit of backstory about me. I grew up in a small town in southern New York State. It isn't entirely unheard of, but unless you live close by, not too many people know about it. Most people I met on Hawaii were from the West Coast. Very few were from the East Coast. Even fewer lived in or had been to New York. The 7 girls I worked with on the farm, and were now hiking the Volcanoes National Park Trail, were all from either California or Oregon. The trail started off in the pre-mentioned Black Sand Desert. If you know deserts, they tend to be very cold in the early hours of the morning and at nighttime, but quickly warm up after the sun rises. We began walking the trail in the early morning, so most of us had sweaters on. The girl I mentioned before, that I was closest to, was from California, yet out of nowhere. She pulls out of her bag a hoodie that says, "My hometown's name" on it. At the time I had forgotten, but my first day working on the farm we were pulling weeds and talking. When I told her I was from New York, she guessed my small hometown of about 4,000 people, 100 miles from the city, on her first try. When I asked her how she knew this, she said, though despite living in California all her life, that her cousins have a vacation house in my town. Despite it being my first day, that was the only person I ever met in Hawaii who knew or had been to my hometown. I still have the picture of us walking on the trail with her wearing the hoodie. That wasn't the only strange occurrence that happened on the trail, however. I don't exactly remember when I started seeing it, but from the corner of my eye, I would swear I kept seeing the same figure over and over again. The best way I could describe it was that it was a black deer that stood upright, not a Wendigo or skinwalker, I can assure you. It was sleek, almost fox-like. It had white paint, or a pattern on its forehead, and glowing red eyes. I had a really good artist's depiction of something like it, but I have not been able to find the picture in any of my old files. I could make out its very fine details, but never saw the thing directly, only from the corner of my eye, and it was on this trail that I had witnessed it the most. Every time I knew it was standing from afar, I would turn my head and it would be a dead tree or something else. I have never had this happen before, and once I left the Big Island, I never saw the figure again. I recently brought this up to my girlfriend, as these kinds of memories come and go. Also picture proof I was on the trail with a harem of girls, just like in my favorite Chinese cartoons. I had taken this photo from the point of view of where I saw the thing standing when I went to go pee away from the cabin. I would also like to add that walking on this trail was a spiritual experience in itself. The trail has begun with us walking through 3 different kinds of deserts and Sahara-like grassland biomes. The halfway point was the cabin where you were to rest and finish the second half of the trail in the morning. That morning we continued walking to the second checkpoint, where we were supposed to fill up our water bottles. However, when we got to the fill-up area, the water tank was closed off, and we had to walk the last 5 miles of the trail severely dehydrated. Luckily, a nice old lady was willing to give us all a ride to the end of the trail. As we were driving to the end of the camp, the outside suddenly switched from a dry, arid desert to a lush tropical jungle. The Big Island reminded me a lot of Minecraft, of when you are exploring. The biomes suddenly changed drastically from one to another. One moment you're in a temperate forest, but the next you can be in a desert or jungle biome. That night we camped out under these massive eucalyptus trees, and watched the lava flowing from up top to an observatory. I have many more paranormal stories, but I wish to share this story with all of you, as it was one of the best days of my life. It is 3 in the morning, and I have work tomorrow, so maybe tomorrow I can post more. Good night.
The obvious thing to mention is night marchers. I've heard stories from different people about them, but honestly, I forget the specifics.
What do you mean?
The spirits of dead Hawaiian warriors. You hear them before you see them. They come at night, usually traveling along old trails. First, you'll hear a ghostly drumming or singing. If you're smart, you'll immediately fall to the ground and close your eyes as the night marchers go passing by. Otherwise, the next morning your friends will discover your dead body lying in the path of night marchers. Those who have seen them and lived to tell the tale say at first, you only see torches moving in a single file. Later, the shadowy specters can be seen, holding the torches. Others say the spirits look like us, like flesh and blood. If one of your ancestors is among the marchers, you can watch the procession without fear. Your ancestors will protect you from any danger.
For now, I will skip to when I moved to Kauai. For those who have never been to any of the Hawaiian Islands, Hawaii is made up of about 8 main islands. From oldest to newest, or from west to east, not counting Midway or the other smaller stools further west. The first island in the chain is Ni'ihau. Ni'ihau is inhabited exclusively by the island's original inhabitants. Approximately 250 people live there today. It was first acquired by a missionary family who had plans to make it into a cattle ranch. However, the time of their arrival had been an exceptionally rainy year, making the grass on the island very abundant. After they established themselves there, they quickly learned that the island's climate was in fact dry most of the year, making it subpar for any kind of farm or ranching to be profitable. The family decided to make it into a sanctuary of sorts, letting only the natives of the island reside there untouched by the rest of the world. You can only go there if you are invited by a resident of the island. I never met anyone from there, but I was told by a local from the neighboring island of Kauai that for school the children of Niihau would be ferried over for school. The woman telling me this said all the high school-aged boys had the exact same peach fuzz mustache going on, implying that everyone on the island was inbred. No surprise if you ask me, considering they have been living on an isolated island for hundreds of not thousands of years, with only a couple hundred people on it. From my time there, I also learned that the topic of incest isn't such a taboo subject for the Polynesian Hawaiians. One time this old lady screamed at me for no reason. She seemed like she was crazy or something was off. I was later approached by someone who knew her personally, about my age at the time, who told me not to pay any mind because she was unironically inbred.
So it's been about 10 years since I was last here. Do people still talk about paranormal experiences, or is it all just magic and cryptids now? Because I need to vent. Pick related, by the way. I moved to Japan to teach English this last summer, the northern island, way out in the boonies. I was blown away to find out that the temporary teacher housing was a 4-room, 2-story house. I asked my supervisor why such a big house, especially when I learned that regular teacher housing are basically a series of duplex buildings next to the school. He just kind of laughed uncomfortably and said, "Don't worry, that comes in later." So it's been months since I moved in now, and nothing crazy has happened. Life out here is pretty boring, lonely. There is exactly one person under age 30 and over age 18 here, and it's me. This is also important because no one has been on the second floor of my house, only a few workers on the first floor when my water heater needed replacing. Nothing crazy has happened, but in retrospect there have been a few things worth mentioning. The house is old and creaky and whatnot, a bit creepy overall, but I've never been easily creeped out. That said, for some reason the second floor always puts me on edge, especially the hallway. I can't walk down that hallway without feeling a really intense urge to check behind me. I knew it was strange that I felt this way, but I chalked it up to moving to a new country by myself. It never went away though. Another thing is really off and on. only 3 times since summer, and I'm now wondering how to even explain it. I'll be wandering through the house doing something or other, and I'll hear a really loud sound, just a flash of it. It's always surprising enough to stop me in my tracks, but the weird part is that I can never actually remember what I heard. I can't put words to the sound in any way, because I can't think of it clearly. It's a bit unnerving, but I just assume it was something weird outside, which is still possible, I guess. So here's the last bit that kind of set me off. Winter in northern Japan is actually a hell of a lot colder than you'd think, and Japanese houses built before 1980 were literally built without insulation, because development companies were just building southern-style buildings, a style that doesn't have to worry about the cold. I found out the hard way that my bedroom and the entire second floor will almost always be something like 5 or 6 degrees Celsius when I go to bed, because another Japanese thing is, what is central heating? I bought a space heater for my bedroom, as well as a humidifier, and I've gotten into the habit of running upstairs an hour before bed to turn them both on so I can at least start my night warm and comfortable. By the time I get up there, the entire upstairs is warmer, and the windows fog up from the heat humidity. You might have guessed what my picture means by now. Last week I went upstairs to go to sleep and genuinely almost pissed myself. That handprint in the condensation was not there until that day. I compared it to my own hand, and the handprint is much smaller. I was so uncomfortable. I took this picture to send to my friends and joke about a ghost in my house, just to alleviate my own unease. I'm very aware that handprints that were already there could appear when the window fogs up, and it's possible that I missed it for like 3 weeks in a row. But it's almost impossible, because that window is right at the top of the stairs, and the first thing I see when I get near the top. This is where I decided I finally needed to get this off my chest. I ran into my neighbor when I was shoveling snow the other day and asked her if she knew anything about the previous residents. I knew that I was the first foreign teacher to live here, but that's all I knew. My neighbor is super chill and told me jokingly about how no one had lived in this house since she moved to the neighborhood 7 years ago, and that it's basically understood to be haunted. I pressed her for more info on that, since it was basically the confirmation of my unfounded fears. But she had nothing. She said not to worry about it. It's just superstitious old people, which is what I would have assumed too. This also explains how cheap the house would have been for the school district to buy, and the odd reaction of my supervisor when I asked about it. So here I am. I'm not expecting help. I just really needed to say it. I don't have anyone else I could talk to about this. I am uncomfortable.
Hi X. I'm mostly a lurker here. I made some posts and stuff on occasion. I work as a diver for one of the seaports on a Portuguese island that I will not name for now. We generally do underwater trash removal and ship maintenance, as well as going down in the fairly shallow port to recover lost items or do general surveys. Now X, in my small city of about 15,000 people, there used to be about 100 years ago a whale hunting tradition. The island used to have all kinds of whales nearby and sea life, including sea lions, or as we call it, sea wolf. In my particular area, the sun doesn't come out often because of the mountains. It's much more humid than the rest of the island, and filled with dense vegetation all around, which tends to attract all kinds of sea life to the shore, mostly because of dense nutrient flow from the mountainside runoff water and the lack of pollution. Also, the region I live in is filled with natural caves. We have folktales here of giant crabs appearing whenever there is a storm and transparent, and white fish washing up ashore during said storms. And most notorious of all, giant moray eels. Giant in loose terms. We are talking about 2 to 3 meters, but obviously people tend to exaggerate. Further offshore, we have small-sized squid and the usual Atlantic Ocean sea life. Okay, so now that context is given, one of the things I liked about my job was finding whale teeth underwater, teeth from whales that were butchered ashore when commercial whale hunting was a thing. However, X, as I think some of you may know, Europe and the Atlantic is undergoing a huge cold wave and storms, which has brought upon us a wide and diverse amount of fishy things that belong only to the bottom of the ocean. Last week during a survey dive, me and one of my dive partners, let's call him Digo, were pulled by a moderately strong current into a region east of the port. We ended up maybe 50 meters from where we were supposed to be. Nothing major, however. As per usual, the seafloor is littered with mid-sized basalt sediment rock with some fine grains all mixed up, which is usually where we sometimes find some embedded whale bones or teeth. However, as I got myself out of the current pull, I found myself at the entrance to a cave that I already knew of and used as a reference point, but due to the murky water, I didn't have much clue before where exactly I was. Anyway, I was planning on surfacing about 20 meters and signaling to the boat my position. By this point, Digo was about 30 meters ahead of me as I was swimming up. I felt a pull to the left of me. As I looked, I saw a big massive eel with moray pattern swimming away from me and straight to Digo, with a black angler fish in its mouth, mind you. Anglers aren't supposed to be here. The eel wasn't particularly long, but had the girth of a shark. It was as if it was 1/3 as wide as it was long, and the size of the skull was just too big. Anyway, as it swims some 20 meters to Digo, when he turns his headlight straight to it, and for some reason it does a 180 degrees turn straight to the bottom and dives off to deeper waters. I'm missing some details for the sake of time, but what is this? Is it even an eel? Do bathypelagic fish really come up during storms? Was this a common eel-like fish? As for the whale teeth, for some reason as of late I have seen many more of them. About 15 to 20. I don't know if this is because of the sediment being remixed or something. But anyway, if I find something cool and out of place, I'll let you know. Things here are getting off. Small fish are going. Whale remains showing up the eel fish. Of course, I told the guys on the team about this, and they said it was a grouper, because groupers can get pretty big. A grouper. Digo doesn't know either, but he said it was a fish with a black head and a long tail. He said there was no angler fish in its mouth, and his head was black and body was brownish. I don't know if folktales say anything about this other than le géant eel stories, which are pretty average big fish stories if you ask me. But anyway, I'll report back tomorrow, going on a recreational dive and spearfishing in this area, depending on the weather.
Take a look at whale teeth. Google it and try again.
Nope, not baleen whales. We are talking about sperm whales, as we call it, cachalot. And that is not my job at all. This kind of stuff.
Alright, so this isn't paranormal. There are no demons or ghosts or women with oranges in this. It's just a really weird thing going on with a weird kid in my weird apartment building that has continued to freak me out to a ridiculous point. So I live in this apartment complex in Parksville, British Columbia. It's a small town on Vancouver Island. The building is fairly nice, mostly families and older people. I'm probably the youngest person living here on their own. So each floor has 4 apartments. Mine is in the back of the building on the 2nd floor. As the title suggests, this has to do with my peephole. I noticed pretty early on that the peepholes in this building were crazy wide angles. Like, when you look through it, you can see pretty much the entire floor. Call me paranoid, but anytime I go out to the kitchen to get a drink at night, I always look through the peephole. I always have anywhere I've lived with one. I don't know. I guess it makes me feel more aware of what's going on. Just in case there's an evil ghost murderer with oranges waiting for me, I'll have a heads up. The people who live directly across from me are a middle-aged guy and his wife. I'm not sure who lives next to me, but the apartment next to the middle-aged guy is a woman and her little girl. I'm bad at judging ages, but I'd guess around 10 years old. So one night, I look through my peephole, and to my surprise, the little girl is standing outside of her door. Just standing there with her back to it in a nightgown type thing. I find it really weird considering it was about 2 a.m., but there she was, just standing there. I half considered opening the door and asking if she was okay, but then she opened the door and went back into her apartment. After that, I checked the peephole more frequently, and soon enough, a few days later, the same thing. It was a little earlier, I think around 12:30, but she was just standing outside her door, plain as could be. She looked around a bit and then went back in. The very next day, I look out my peephole and she's standing in front of my door. Not like up against it, she's in the middle hall, but she's facing my door. It scared the hell out of me. So I'm just standing there, watching this creepy little kid standing in front of my door at something like 2 in the morning. Then she went back to her apartment. She's done this 3 more times now, just standing there, facing my door, in the middle of the night. What the hell? I'm too much of a coward to speak out and ask her anything, but seriously, why is this little girl staring at my door in the middle of the night?
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I used to live in Hawaii for about 9 months, and I hear many stories about hauntings that take place there. Everything from night marchers, the ancestral dead, that walk the island, to ghosts in the Pali. I had some strange experiences while I was there, and I would like to share one with you. In 2004, there was a girl I really liked. One night I summed up the courage to ask her on a date. We went to a restaurant, drank some wine, and at about 11 p.m. we decided to go to a beach called Mokapu, which is near Honolulu. It was really dark and there was hardly anyone out. We talked about each other's lives and experiences, and we laid down and listened to the ocean for a few hours. At about 2 a.m., strange things started happening. Me and the girl I was with felt our hands being touched by something small. We thought it was miniature crabs, but when we looked, there was nothing there. The moon was full that night, so you could see a lot of stuff, but we saw no crabs. Then the weirdest sound was heard by both of us. It sounded like a baby crying. Keep in mind it was 2 a.m. and no one was around. The nearest house is about 5 miles away. We kept on hearing the crying. We both thought that it was a cat crying or something, but when we looked in the direction of the crying, there was no cat to be found. We kept on feeling our hands being touched too. We both had had enough and we decided to leave. I just put it to the back of my mind thinking that it was crabs and a cat. 2 months later, I was sitting with my hairstylist, who is a local, and we began talking about strange things that happen on the island. We were talking about night marchers and haunted burial grounds. Then she started talking about Mokapu. I asked, what is so scary about that place? She said that a long time ago, Hawaiians used to take the deformed babies and kill them at Mokapu. She told me some people say that if you stay there long enough, you will hear them crying. She told me that she heard them herself one night when she was there. The hair on my neck and on my entire body stood up. I told her what happened to me there. I knew nothing about this story until the day she told me, and until now it still gives me the creeps.
So this is a story about a reptilian myself and a bunch of other people saw. I live in Delaware, and my family and I were taking a tour of Fort Delaware. It's an island that was originally a prison in Fort. B-16. A few months ago, Mom suggests we take a tour of Fort Delaware. I don't want to go .jpg. Next day, we get our tickets and hop on the boat to the island. Approach island after a 10-minute boat ride. Looks like an abandoned sweatshop. We pull up to the docks. I hopped off and we were led to our tour guides. Tour guide introduces herself as Tammy. Tammy leads our group to the dunes and marsh area. We are watching and taking pictures and such. Anon, what's that behind the grass dune? I look. I see a dark figure sort of slither away. Everyone saw it, including Tammy. She proceeds to lead the group to investigate, walk over the dune. 2 naked, brown, scaly human beings were near a dugout in the dune. One of them was startled away and dived into the water and disappeared. The other one just kind of sat there and looked perplexed. OMG, someone needs to get a picture. Old guy next to me snapped a few shots with his Polaroid. Thank God, or no one would believe us. After a brief 15 seconds, the creature dives into the water and swims away like a crocodile does in water. Ask old guy if he got pictures, and he said yes. We all were kind of shaken at what we saw and talked about it the whole time. When we come back to the boat to depart, the Coast Guard is there. What the hell .jpg? Mom walks past them and we all sit on the boat and go back to the mainland. My face when the old man talked to the Coast Guard about the pictures. The old man and a few others never got back on the boat. I think the Coast Guard kidnapped them. The old man was naive enough to give the Coast Guard the pictures. There are no pictures to prove this story is true. Picture related. It's what they looked like and how they looked at us.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.